Chapter 8. How can we heal our child within? To rediscover our true or real self and heal our child within, we can begin a process that involves the following 4 actions. 1. Discover and practice being our real self or child within. Number 2. Identify our ongoing physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual needs. Practice getting these needs met with safe and supportive people. Number 3. Identify, re-experience, and grieve the pain of our ungrieved losses or traumas in the presence of safe and supporting people. Number 4. Identify and work through our core issues described below. These actions are closely related, although not listed in any particular order. Working on them, and thereby healing our child within, generally occurs in a circular fashion, with work and discovery in one area, a link to another area. Stages in the process of recovery. Survival. To get to the point of recovery, we must survive. Survivors are by necessity codependents. We use many coping skills and ego defenses to do this. Children of alcoholics and from other troubled or dysfunctional families survive by dodging, hiding, negotiating, taking care of others, pretending, denying, and learning and adapting to stay alive, using any method that works. They learn other, often unhealthy ego defense mechanisms, as described by Anna Freud in 1936 and summarized by Valiant in 1977. These include intellectualization, repression, disassociation, displacement, and reaction formation, all of which, if overused, can be considered to be neurotic, and projection, passive-aggressive behavior, acting out, hypochondriosis, grandiosity, and denial, all of which, if overused, can be considered immature and at times psychotic. While these defenses are functional in our dysfunctional family, they tend to work poorly for us as adults. When we attempt to participate in a healthy relationship, they tend not to further our best interests. Using them stifles and stunts our child within and promotes and reinforces our false or codependent self. Jenny was a 21-year-old woman who grew up in an alcoholic family. At the beginning of her recovery, she wrote the following poem. It exemplifies some of the pain of the survival stage. The poem is called Afraid of the Night. Like the child waiting in the night for warm hands and arms to wrap themselves around her loneliness, to spend herself in tears of sudden safety and of love. I, too, in the dark aloneness of self unloved, unanchored, abandoned, and denied, still summon with silent child cries the ancient hope, the old sure magic of wantedness. The child still lives in me, with that eager hurt of innocence bewildered and betrayed. Ah, that painful paradox. To sense the rescue and know there is none, but driven by old dreams, pale yet powerful, remembrances of the soft, dear touch of love. I wait. One waits. One always waits. It is forgotten, that nameless need, The years have beaten from my wasted heart, but like some unshaped primeval force, it beckons, crowds my reality, blunts stiff reason, and I am grotesque with helpless wanting, turning my mind inwards, backwards. Dull, too, is pain with young memories that weaken and defy, submit, then die. I do not live. I wait in such unhope. Here, Jenny tells us about her pain, numbness, isolation, and hopelessness. Yet she also reflects one ray of potential hope in the line, "The child still lives in me." Part of recovery is to discover ourselves, our child, and how we use these ineffective means of relating to ourselves, to others, and to the universe. This can be most productively accomplished during the working stages of recovery. While it is clear that we are surviving, it is also true that we experience a good deal of pain and suffering, or we become numb, or we alternate between suffering and numbness. Slowly, we become aware that these very skills and defenses that allowed us to survive as mistreated infants, children, and adolescents do not work well when we try to have healthy, intimate relationships as adults. It is the frustration of this mistreatment, that suffering of codependence, and this failure in our relationships that do not work for us, that push and at times even force us to begin looking elsewhere than these ineffective methods. That looking elsewhere can trigger our recovery. Gravitz and Bowden from 1985 describe recovery in their ACOA patients as occurring in 6 stages. First stage is survival. Second is emergent awareness. 3 is core issues. 4 is transformations. 5 is integration. And 6 is genesis, or spirituality. These stages parallel the 4 stages of life growth and transformation described by Ferguson in 1980, and the 3 stages of the classical mythological hero or heroine journey as described by Campbell from 1946 and by others. There's another chart here. Each stage is useful in healing our child within. Each stage is often recognized only in retrospect. When we are in the stage, we do not always realize that we are there. This is one reason why it is helpful to have a sponsor, a guide, a counselor, or a therapist during recovery. A therapy group that uses principles of ACOA recovery described in this book and elsewhere can be especially helpful. Awakening. Emergent awareness. Awakening is the first glimpse that things or reality are not what we thought. Awakening is an ongoing process throughout recovery. To begin, we generally require an entry point or trigger, anything that shakes up our old understanding or belief system of reality, of the way that we thought things were. Ferguson and Whitfield. Because our true self is so hidden, and because our false or codependent self is so prominent, awakening may not come easily. Nonetheless, it often happens. I have witnessed this process in hundreds of children of trauma. The entry point or trigger may range across a wide spectrum. It may start with hearing or reading someone describe their own recovery or own true self, or being sick and tired of our suffering, or beginning to work seriously on another life problem in counseling or therapy. For others, it may be attending a self-help meeting or an educational experience, reading a book, or hearing about it from a friend. At this time, we often begin to experience confusion, fear, enthusiasm, excitement, sadness, and numbness and anger. These mean that we are beginning to feel again. We begin to get in touch with who we really are, our child within, our real self. At this point, some people will give up. They will go no further. They find it easier and more comfortable to retreat back into their false or codependent self, into a relapse of codependence, because these feelings are frightening. Those who are recovering alcoholic, other drug dependent, or dependent upon other unproductive behavior, such as overeating or compulsive gambling, may begin to experience a relapse, or they may precipitate another form of shame-based compulsive behavior, such as spending money that they do not have. But this awakening can be an opportunity to take a risk or a plunge to discover our whole self, our aliveness, and even eventually our happiness. Finding help. At this point, it is helpful to find a sponsor, a counselor, or a therapist to help us discover and heal our child within. The recovering person, however, is usually so vulnerable, often related to the confusion, fear, and enthusiasm and/or the resistance of recovery, that he or she might find a sponsor or clinician who has not worked through his or her own recovery of their child within. If that person cannot get his or her own needs met, he or she may use the newly awakened person to meet some of these needs. The result is that the patient, client, student, or a pigeon is traumatized again, resulting in the vicious cycle of unresolved trauma and return to the false self. From Miller and Jacoby. Guidelines. The following The following are guidelines to find a sponsor, a therapist, or a counselor who will usually tend to be helpful rather than harmful. The person will tend to have 1. Demonstrable training and experience. For example, a clinician or a therapist has training and experience in helping people to grow mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, as well as being effective in helping with specific problems or conditions, such as being an ACOA or an AC, adult child of a troubled family. 2, not dogmatic, rigid, or judgmental. 3, the person will tend to have, this is the list of the things the person will tend to have. 3, no promise of quick fixes or answers. 4, while you sense that they genuinely care about you as a human being and about your recovery and growth, they are firm enough to push you to do your own work of recovery. 5, provide some of your needs: listening, mirroring, echoing, safety, respect, understanding, and accepting your feelings during the therapy session. 6, encourage and help you learn to find ways outside the therapy session to get your needs met in a healthy way. And 7, they are well progressed in healing their own inner child, or their own child within. 8, they do not use you to get their needs met. This may be difficult to detect. 9, you feel safe and relatively comfortable with them. Occasionally, a friend during recovery has many of these qualities. However, a friend or relative is not forced to listen with full attention. and is generally not trained in helping you with your specific problems. Friends and relatives may want you for their needs, sometimes in unhealthy or unconstructive ways, and some friends or relatives, usually unconsciously, will sooner or later betray you or reject you. You may end up feeling toxic or crazy. Being close to these unrecovered people is generally not safe. Avoid them when possible. It will probably take some time before you can trust the process of therapy and recovery enough so that you feel okay about taking risks, to begin exposing your true self. Give yourself that time. For some, the time needed will be relatively short, a matter of weeks. For others, it may take longer than a year. It is important to share these fears with your therapist and not withhold them. Taking this one step breaks the pattern of denying feelings that you learned as a child. As you feel a sense of trust, you can begin the former risk of talking about your innermost secrets, fears, or concerns. I have described the healing power of telling our story in Alcoholism and Spirituality, and others have also described it, Hillman, 1983. Whether in individual or group therapy, it is helpful to talk, even if at first you must stutter or ramble. Feel free to ask your counselor or therapist, group leader, or group member for feedback about how you come across. Excuse me. No matter what type of therapy you choose, it is definitely helpful to do some work of recovery on your own, outside the session. This can include activities from wandering, considering, questioning, and exploring various ideas and possibilities, to keeping a diary or a journal, to telling your dreams to trusted people, to working through conflicts with others. Eventually, when you talk to others about yourself, it is useful to your recovery that you begin to become clearer and briefer, especially if you are in a therapy group or self-help group. There is a truism in counseling that people in therapy generally relate and behave in the same or similar ways that they behave outside of therapy. It may be helpful in your recovery to ask your therapist or group how you are doing in this area. Excuse me. Finally, there is the issue of transference in therapy, which includes your feelings and conflicts around your relationship with your counselor, your therapist, or your group. Take a risk and express exactly how you feel, even if angry, shameful, guilty, or whatever. No matter how unimportant it might seem at first to you, keep telling yourself that your feelings are okay, despite your fears that they are bad or unjustified. Once you feel trusting enough so that you can risk self-disclosure in recovery, you are usually ready to begin conscious work on some of your core issues. I appreciate you listening to me reading you a story from Healing the Child Within by Charles L. Whitfield, MD. Thank you.